Trend charts. Now, when we got this information, we ought to do something about it. Trend charts. Here we go in our SSV, settled sludge volume, and your SSC, the settled sludge concentration. The RSC, the return sludge concentration. DOB, the depth of sludge blanket. And then you should also run a trend of your sludge wasting, a trend of your turbidity, your effluent suspended solids, and your final effluent turbidity. You got them all on nice trend charts. You can look right up and down the line, and if something is cockeyed, you can look at these other curves and see what most logically caused that discrepancy. There again. First of all, we don't do this every day, but at least once a week, possibly sometimes we do it once a day. You actually want to plot. Here I just went out for 60 minutes. And this was Denver, a good sludge at one time on the 19th, December 19th, and we saw how it settled. In 5 minutes it came down to about 560. I'll tell you what, that was settling a little bit too fast. But this on the 29th, in 5 minutes it only settled down to... That should have been for this bottom one, where it drops like a rock and the whole thing explodes. Up here it only settled to 905 minutes. Obviously, that's a poor sludge. That's a slow settling sludge. And on the 13th of January, they got over the hump and it settled too darn fast. It went down below 200. But this didn't tell you the sludge quality. It just looked as though it might be normal, slow, and fast. Calculate the SSC curve, ATC divided by SSV, and look what we have. Here is the normal curve. It's concentrated from about 3 up to about 15 in 60 minutes. This is almost an ideal sludge curve. Here's an excellent sludge. This one here concentrated to 19, it was still going up. This is too old a sludge. Settling like mad, concentrating like mad, settling like mad, in a turbid liquid. Kind of a poor effort. Definitely 30 people. Here we had a bulking sludge concentrating to only about SSC 5 in 60 minutes. Terrible sludge, too young, until it blew over. See, every morning you come along and the sludge blanket, even a poor one, is way down below. And although we didn't measure spot samples, I'm sure the BOD and suspended solids were much less than 5, maybe 3. But come 2 o'clock, zingo, out she goes. Suspended solids, 375. Well, you can't handle that. You have to control that, get rid of it. And then, after you do that, you should actually plot your trends. Here is nothing. Here's the SSV curve. You can see where it was settling fast. They caught control, then too slow, SSC 60, I can't read the numbers, but you carry this along day by day, and the turbidity, you can see we had a good turbidity in normal times here, and when it settled too slow and went over, poor turbidity, finally they caught control again, and they started to settle about right, concentrations about 14, turbidities went down, and they held this. If you want to see what they were wasting, they know that they wasted a lot here, a little here, and what happened to the blanket. Then down below here, he keeps a lot about the number, area, detention time, and so forth. Now, he's going to do some calculating, but he always look back and see if these responses are logical. If they're logical, he goes ahead. If they aren't logical, he gets out his thinking cap, and that's what we need in the operators. A real, honest, goodness, intelligent, dedicated, thinking kind of a fellow. Things don't look right, don't agree with what we say, think it out and find out what's right. But if you gather useful information and study it, the odds are you're going to come up with the right answer. We've said this many times. We get in front of a group like this, and with the intelligent group, real intelligent people that are perceptive rather than just lookers, we would guess that within 2 to 5 years, they'd be doing what we're doing all by themselves, something like it. But if we can come in with a gang and tell them how to, we'll save the poor rascals any place from 2 to 4 years of fumbling around. We'll start them out on the right track right away, and away they go. Okay. Oh, now, see, we did make the test. We observed, we tested. We drew the trend chart so you know what you have, how things are changing. But now, let's calculate and see what we should do with the valves. I'll make something very easy. You know, the thing I didn't show here was running aerator, aeration tank DO. I don't think I have to talk about that. For goodness sakes, measure your DO. Measure it throughout the tank occasionally. Measure the depths. Find out what you got. Be sure you got it. Look at your tanks. Do you have boils? Are your diffusers placed properly? Are you plugged up? Changed? This is all old hat to any operator who's been on the plant more than 6.5 minutes. And the next thing is, with normal sludge, almost all the time, it doesn't make too much difference where your DO is as long as it's above, say, 2 to 4 is nice. But supposing that one blower, let's say you got this thing, 2 blowers. One blower gives you 0.8 ppm. I know I'm off base here, but 2 blowers gives you 8 ppm. It gets over the hump. Don't waste air to get the 8 down to 4. But you got to use the 2 blowers to get your at least 2 ppm for normal sludges. But now, for normal sludges, 2 to 4, you don't care what it is. Everything's great. If you have either bulking sludge or clumping sludge, that requires another 2 hours. Why? The opposite extremes ask for the same control measure. Hold your DO and your, as long as you have mixing, but hold your DO as low as possible. Don't ask me why. I've done it dozens of times. See, I made my mistakes dozens of times until I found out that, well, you think in terms of, gee, this is a poor sludge, I better pour the air to it. Everything is logical, and I'd pour the air to it and it got worse. And I'd pour the air to it and it got worse until I finally got sense and held it back down to about as low, about 1 part per million. 0.5 would be better if you know your meter is reading right and you got good mixing. So, for a bulking sludge or a clumping sludge, get that air back down. It's gospel. Okay, now here's how you use this information. Remember these old friends of ours, the settled sludge concentrations for the rapid sludge, the normal sludge, and the slow sludge. Here's your control zone. Let's look at this rapid settling sludge first of all. Look, it concentrated from about 5 up to 15 to 20 to 25 and then went over like this. And you ask me, why do we run an RSC? This is the SSC. This is ultimate compaction. This is what it can compact to. But let's say you found that your RSC was 30. You want to bring that darn thing down. Supposing then that you'd control, I think, let's say this is 24. So you say, somehow or other, I really want to make my RSC, return sludge concentration, match what the sludge can actually do. Supposing you say, I'll make it exactly 24, doesn't mean anything, does it? Because 24 might mean that you left the sludge in the clarifier half an hour, or it might mean you left it in 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, or 8 hours. You don't know what you've done. So you always must adjust return to get your return sludge down within the sloping part of this line. In other words, in this case, you'd want to adjust return sludge flow so that your return sludge concentration would be something around 20. And then you say, this will stay in the clarifiers about a half an hour. The same thing for this normal sludge. Now here, this agrees with the pamphlet series on return sludge flow control. You don't want to get it out as thick as you can way out here because you might still leave it in the, you might be in perfect control but leave it in the clarifier for 8 hours. You don't want that. So you come down in the sloping part of the curve, someplace in here. So here's your control range. You might adjust return to force the return sludge concentration someplace between, I think it's 14 and 16. And you're in great shape. And you'll be dragging that out in about 50 minutes. Now, here is the son of a gun. Slow settling bulking sludge. That's the hardest to control. But there, usually when you're really in bulking, you won't see this kind of a curve. Look, you go up like this, and then you have an inflection point. Usually, now the object of the game is to hunt out this inflection point and try and adjust your return sludge to this inflection point. That'd be something like 10. Maybe we're talking about 10,000 ppm or a 10 RSC. And the sludge should have remained in the clarifier about 2 hours. All right, you can do this by trial and error, cut and try. We'll give you a simple formula that works almost 100% of the time. Any questions on this yet? Part of your return sludge control is based on sludge quality as defined by the settling, the concentration curves. And these are telling you, it's saying, hey, Mr. Operator, I can comfortably concentrate to this. Why the heck don't you leave me in the clarifier until I get almost there and then drag me out? Now that'll do two things. If you get optimum return, that means you'll be leaving it in the anaerobic clarifier environment as short a time as possible. And furthermore, you won't be pulling it out too fast, because if you pull it out too fast, you're just pumping a lot more water back to your aeration tanks, and you're reducing your effective aeration and sludge aeration detention time. See how simple that is? Now, okay, I said, this I'm going to go through very rapidly. I'm not going to try and explain it. It takes too long. It's in one of these white bulletins here, BLT versus CSP. Blanket thickness versus return sludge flow control. In the olden days, I used to look at it, turn my ear like this and say, hey, why don't you adjust it to this, get 35% return sludge flow. It was easy enough to do it, but I couldn't tell anybody how to do it. So I found I had to determine a way of predicting the proper return sludge flow control. This is the way you do it. And it works most of the time. As I said before, it's all based on sludge quality. And sludge quality is defined by what? Come on, somebody answer. SSC curve. This is the curve that you're going to use to make some simple calculations that tell you what percent return. Just like that. Now, as we go through, in the bulletin, I think I've calculated these points. That's why they're showing it. And I have found that later on, this is the optimum range. All right, don't try. What we're saying is that here is the rationale behind the equation. The equation is in your book here. The optimum blanket thickness is this. This is based only on mixed liquor and a percent return. We call it the sludge fraction. It'll apply to any clarifier. And if you want to make it apply to your clarifier, you plug in the actual flow and the clarifier volume. Now, here again, when we get into that, I'll tell you, the trends work. You may not get a number that corresponds to the blanket you read. Don't worry about it. But this will usually tell you, if I do this, I'll go higher. If I do that, I'll go lower. This part of the equation is pretty good. This, just think. You can't think in terms of all the differences between various types of clarifiers. They react different. Your inlet velocities, the turbulence, the overflow, no matter what you might expect theoretically, the clarifier is going to do something different. But the general range will be right. And it's saying that what you want to do is get this stuff out while make the return sludge mass equal the inlet sludge mass that enters in one clarifier sludge detention time interval. In other words, if you're letting the sludge stay in here an hour and a half, you want to get an hour and a half's worth of that sludge out. If you're leaving it in 2 hours, that's all there's to it. And it's all in here. And here's what happens. Using that calculation and that curve, here's what we found. I just calculated those points. And this is BLT, blanket thickness. This is your clarifier. Water level up here, a schematic diagram. 1/10 of the clarifier, 2, 3, 4, BLT, fraction of the fraction of the clarifier containing the blanket. We calculated this, and the calculation said, hey, Al, why don't you return about 70% return sludge? Just that simple. And clarifier sludge percent return, thank you, return sludge concentration and the hours are all related. If you draw one scale, you can just calculate the other scale. So this here calculation said, Al, why don't you return 70% return sludge. This will give you an RSC return of about 10, and it will have remained in that clarifier, and that was a big one, for about 4 hours. Now let me show you what that meant in practice. And I'll go for just this one here. And it says, listen, Buster, if you return too much, my blanket's going to rise. But woe unto you if you return too little. He said, you're going to blow me right out of the doggone clarifier. And here's what actually happened. This was which plant? Oh, this was Williamsburg. Yeah, Williamsburg. We had been returning about 200%. And this is before I had the equation. I mean, I looked at it. I said, son of a gun, I know that's too much. I got the thing back to about 100 to 120%. And lo and behold, my blanket went down. Remember, everybody says, if your sludge is too high, increase your return sludge flow and knock it down. Again, the answer to that is BPS, point. So I reduced. I lowered the blanket by reducing. Then I said, boy, look how smart I am. I'll lower it a little bit more. The next day, I reduced down to about, I think there was 2 or 3 days, but I reduced down to about in the 70% range. My blanket went down again. Life was beautiful. So I said, now I'll really show these guys an effluent. And I reduced it down to 55%. Bang, my sludge was all out of the clarifier again. It followed this almost perfectly. Now, because it followed this perfectly because it was accidental. You just don't get the numbers to agree with the conditions you measure in the clarifier. But these trends are logical, and you can predict what they'll be. Now, here, and Williamsburg again. If you have the same sludge quality, now remember, this same sludge quality, same mixed liquor concentration, the blanket, this you all know, will just go up and down with flow. Just look at this. At 2 million gallons, the blanket might be 2 million gallons per day in this plant, might be 2/10 of the clarifier. At 4 million, 4/10. Multiply 4 by 2 is 8, it'll be about 8/10. But the key is, with equal sludge quality, everything is based on the percentage. Your optimum always falls in the same place. Optimum is always the same. And here's what happened. You know, we had no trouble with that plant when it was up to 5 or 6 MGD. When it got up to 8 million during the day, it was just plain touch and go. And I'll tell you frankly, when we were in 7 to 8 million gallons, if I'd hold right to here, I could hold that blanket in the tank. If I'd miss it, I'd lose it. But then at times it went up to 12 MGD, and I said, gee, why am I not smart enough to control that? Well, later on I did these calculations. I showed why. It was absolutely, utterly impossible to hold that blanket in the clarifier. It can't stay in the clarifier. It's got to go out. So the practical range here was about 7 MGD. Now I'm going to, and this is important here, but supposing you were to change mixed liquor sludge quality, mixed liquor concentration. Say you have a mixed liquor of 2,000, maybe you're going to run at 3,000, or maybe you're going to run at 1,500. The rules change. Now let's talk about an equal flow. Say you got a nice equal flow this day, same flow the next day, same flow the next day, and you have the same kind of sludge quality. Remember, settling rate is different, but quality is the same. Then everything changes. Here we had an ATC, ATC of 5, fully loaded. And look, he had, and here I'm talking about the sludge fraction. You remember, the left-hand side is just a number. The number gets bigger or smaller. The blanket would be up here in this range. High blanket. When you do the best you can, it's high, and you're usually going to blow it out. But look what it says. You're going to have to return about 100% at optimum. Take the same sludge quality. Let's say the mixed liquor was dropped from 5.5 to 3.4. Heck, now it's a lot easier. That blanket is normally going to stay down. If you hit optimum, you'll never have any trouble. But to hit optimum, look, you got to return about 50 to 55%, not 100%. But now let's say you thin this out. There may be other dangers of thinning it out. You thin it out to about 2,000 ppm. It's just a piece of cake. I mean, the hard part is to go wrong. You can't go wrong. It'll stay down there all the time. See how it's a function? But you better return about 20%. That's the whole theory of BLT control. Let's see what comes next. I mean, that's all in this paper. It tells you how to and why. Oh, I better go. Any questions on that right now? Let's not make it complex, but do you kind of see what we're talking about? There's return sludge flow control. You control your blanket by return sludge flow percentage, 50%, 75%, exerts the greatest influence on controlling the blanket, but it also influences sludge quality and effluent quality. Now let me get ahead of myself. Let's talk about wasting control. Wasting control exerts its strongest influence on sludge quality and also secondarily on blanket thickness. Okay? See how this thing should start falling into place. But thank goodness we were able to try this out at Hyde Creek. Here we did this again. I think I told you how lucky I was that it was confirmed at Williamsburg, and here was a trial at Hyde Creek. And we had a lot of data, but we divided it up into what we call three. Low percent returns when we were returning in the range of 40 to 50%, medium when we were returning about 60 to 80%, and high when we were returning about 88 to 100%. You can see what I'm driving at. We found out this was optimum, about 70%. And here we are. The whole bundle of lows, percentage again, 44%. The mediums, about 67%. The highs, we're returning about 90%. Obviously, this will happen every time. If you don't return very much with same quality, you're only pulling very little, you leave a lot of sludge in the clarifier, it concentrates. Low return, high return sludge concentration. Went up to 14. Middle, optimum, RSC was about 11. When we returned a little bit too much, we pulled a lot of water back with it. RSC was about 9.5. But, and if we got time, I'll go into some of the nuances. But all the time, the mixed liquor concentration stayed about the same. Look, at medium it was 5.4 by spin. That'd be about 5,500. The high was 5.3. Now, whenever you see this, and then the low drops down, it shouldn't. ATC should ride along straight. See what this meant? We were returning so little that you usually maintain a dynamic equal balance between sludge units in the aerator and in the clarifier. If you return too much, you just pull more thinner sludge. So ATC should still remain the same. But if you return too little, you're not getting it out of the clarifier fast enough. It's piling up in the clarifier, and it's reducing ATC. Just this alone would tell you you're not returning enough. All right, this just shows the obvious, how you can change, how RSC changed, and here's a hint. You say something's cockeyed. And here are the actual results. I'll tell you what. We were running a real plant. We were concerned about the river. We were confined. We couldn't return much more than too much because we would have destroyed the plant. We couldn't return much less than what was too little because we would have had solids all over the place. So we were stayed in a rather narrow band, and unfortunately, we don't therefore show any dramatic results. But the results did confirm the theory again. Look what happened here. Oh, here were the flows. See, flows, we selected only about the 1 million gallon flow. Look, flows and the flow is always about 1 million gallons, whether we turn too little, about right, or too much. The clarifier sludge flow, this is repetition, half a million gallons, 2/3 million gallons, 1 million gallons, which is 44%, 6, and so forth. But here's the key. This was a 10-foot clarifier, by the way. And when we had the average of the low returns, the blanket was up to about almost a half of the final clarifier volume. Half of the clarifier was full of blanket. When we got into the medium, which was optimum, about 1/3 of the clarifier was occupied by sludge. But then, as we increased the return, about almost a half. Not dramatic, but again, proof that these things work. I know they work, but I just have to get something out to say, look, Buster, it did happen. Process potential. Okay, I'll go. And now what have we been talking about? Here's your process potential. When I send my gang out to a decent plant, I figure if you got a real decent plant and a trained operator, he should get 5 to 10 milligrams per liter of BOD most of the time. Now, when any regulatory agency says thou shalt get that every day in the week, 365 days, every hour in the day, he might not know his business. I mean, we all find ourselves faced with some real unusual situation. Maybe we goofed, maybe it's an act of God. You're not going to hold on to this all the time. But most of the time, I mean maybe 90% of the time, we should be getting this kind of an effluent. When I send my gang out, I say, listen, you better get down to 5s and 3s with a good plant because you've been at it for 3 years. And I forget why I put, oh, and you should be able to get nitrification, just like falling off of a log. Here's just 2 examples. This was one plant. Here is the effluent before we came in. 3 weeks after we just plugged in the same control procedure we're talking about, the effluent looked like that. Here is another plant. Here's how it looked before we came in. But this shows something. We were there for a week. We just couldn't do anything in a week, but we did come back 6 months later. This gang then had the opportunity to put this in practice day after day after day, do a little bit of on-site learning, cleaning up their thoughts, adjusting gradually, wiggling around, doing these things logically. About 6 months later, there's their final clarifier. That's what we're talking about. Now, what do we got next? Okay, very important. Let's stop here for a moment with the lights. There must be some questions on this so far. Yes?
That's standard operating job procedure, SOJP.
Carl Schwing?
Right.
Pretty much tailored after this.
SCR.
Pat?
They identified something they call SCR.
Sludge concentration ratio. That is something I wish I had never written. Now, what's the next question? Sludge concentration ratio. That's the ratio between the measured mixed liquor concentration in ppm, let's say 2,000, divided by the ATC by spin, let's say it's 2, is 1,000. Now, what I said is almost right, but it's really wrong. But it is a strong indicator of sludge quality. I think in there I said that sludge concentration ratio. Whenever that ratio, when it's about, I said when it's about, or if it's 1,000, I mean it's 1 to 1 multiplied by 1,000. It's usually too old a sludge. And I said if the ratio is about 800, that means you might have something like an 80, huh?
That's not the one I'm talking about. No? This one takes SSC, divides it by RSC, and says if it's less than 1, it's bad, and if it's between 1 and 2, it's probably okay. If it's greater than 2, then they're making a judgment between the concentration and return. Okay. That's not very good either. Sorry fellas, it ain't. Because it's like saying ATC is a function of ATC, that you've always all gone through that if you've studied it. Within certain limits, there will be a shallow fluctuation that does tell you something, but it's too shallow to use. I wish I hadn't written it. If I revise, I'll dump that. There's something to it, but it could be much more misleading than helpful. Yes, but the general tone, I forget which I said is better, is usually better, the other is usually worse. Yes, sir?
What page, Ben?
Take it in context. I mean, it's not a very, it might cause you more trouble than help. You don't need it. Next one.
What's your success rate on troubleshooting of using this method?
If the plant can be operated, and we learned that too. I used to think I was so doggone smart I could go into any plant and make it work. And son of a gun, I wasn't that smart because some of the plants are absolutely inoperable. If they're operable at all, if they've been designed properly and about within load, success rate would be in excess of 85%, maybe 90%.
With the flow, with the effluent flow coming into the plant, having anything to do with your form?
You mean the raw flow coming in?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I used to, there again, I hate like heck to make excuses. I recall a couple of cases where things went this way, and I hear everybody say, oh, well, everything was going good, but I got a bad waste.
I was saying, oh, you rascal, all you're doing is making excuses. I'll never fall into that trap. So anytime I got a bad effluent, I said, it's my fault. What did I do wrong? Until I finally found out sometimes you do get those kind of flows coming in. You might have toxic substances, you might have coagulating chemicals, you might have a real strong BOD overload that upsets you even though you're right. Yes, it shouldn't happen, but yes. I'm talking the success rate when you got a ghost of a chance. Or rather, I should say, if you put this all together and you have about a year's experience of using it, and the way you use this, you don't throw away anything you know. Keep everything in your hip pocket. Use the best of everything. I sincerely believe you'll use most of this. Then use what works for you. And at the end of that time, when you do all that for a year or two, you know you're right. And if something really goes cockeyed, you say, hey, what else is wrong? And you find out it. You know, the plant asks you, what have you done for me lately? You said, well, what have you done to me yesterday? Next question. No? Okay.
In some of the plants, in the summertime especially, you get, in your sludge processing streams, you get recycles coming back, either through the primaries to the secondary operations or directly to the secondary operation. What advice do you have to control the aeration process during the plant recycle upsets?
Follow the same methodology. The real advice is, for goodness sakes, know what hurt you. Get back in there and eliminate that stream. That's a good point. Yes, we've all been just murdered by recycling stuff that shouldn't get back into the process. I'll tell you the classic case, Williamsburg again. They had sludge thickeners. Oh, my God. Aerobic digesters, and then they were thickening aerobic sludge, and the so-called supernatant from the thickeners went right in the aeration tanks. You know what happens? Somebody didn't control. You got a nice sludge over here, a lousy old sludge over here. Forget to open a valve, boom! Throw about 15,000 gallons of 67,000 ppm septic lousy sludge into your aerator, boom! You're dead. Yeah, all that kind. The thing to do is to identify these things and then try your best. Now, the one I talked about was easy. They just had to get at these operators and finally close up one whole darn manhole, and if they spilled over, it'd get all over the doggone plant ground. They'd have to clean it up before the superintendent got there, and then they'd get chewed out besides. That solved it. Yeah, you got a lot of things facing you. We can't do it all by control. We're talking about design, operation. A good plant, and the good plant, you wouldn't have to do this. Operation, good operators are not going to make the obvious mistakes too many times. We all make them, but not too many times. Another question?
At what point would you have to use chemical control?
Whenever you can't make it work by operational control. That's about, I really mean it. Up at Albany, Oregon, we worked like dogs. We got a corn waste coming in. We had that plant working, whenever I say we, I mean me and the operators that are operating. I mean, it's always a joint effort. We're teaching them the method I developed, and they're usually pretty sharp guys. They catch on, they do the job. Before that, they'd have effluents of 3-4 ppm all the time until that corn waste hit. That corn waste, even though the BOD only doubled, the effects of it were about 10 times as much. Bang! So I spent one whole season, because I'm so smart, you know, I'm going to correct this by operational control. I couldn't do it. The next season we put in, we tried polymers. They didn't work. We got onto ferric chloride right into the final clarifier. The key was the point of application of the ferric chloride. Bang, worked like a dream, and away we were. First, for control, if you can't do it, go to chemicals. Analyze your plants. See what Mickey Mouse corrections you can make, or do you have to do something on long term? Yes, sometimes you must use chemicals. Okay, let's see where we're going. Let's see what I got up here. I'll see myself first. Well, what did I say? Step feed aeration. Oh, we said this already, didn't we? Contact stabilization, use that for sludge bulking. Plug flow for best effluent from good sludge. Multiple feed point, that's your transition between contact and plug flow modes. I think we've described everything here. Oh, this is Downingtown. We're in the case histories already. I hope I didn't forget too much. Downingtown, they had a plant that just wouldn't work. Okay, I have to get a decent diagram. But it was going through here in parallel stream over to here. So Charlie Bardner, one of our fellows, went up there, and he Mickey Moused this around, so somehow or other he could use both clarifiers and get all the return sludge into here, going backwards, around into here, close off this valve, and bring return and mixed liquor through here. See, it was sort of a compromised step flow. When we got in there, nothing would happen. He went to step flow. Maybe I can explain it better on this next chart. Look what happened. Someplace around here, parallel flow. And this is just, what is it? Detention times. Okay, when it was going through parallel flow, like plug flow, you can see the detention time was about 6 hours. The sludge was in there 6 hours. The waste was in there 6 hours per pass. And a lousy effluent. He changed it over to this modified contact. Half of the plant was only taking return sludge and working on it like mad at long detention times. And rather shortly, the sludge detention time got up to 16 hours because you had such a low flow rate going through there. But the waste detention time came down to about 3 hours. And lo and behold, everything got better. All of a sudden, you got a good effluent, but he kept it up. Oh, and here's another caution. Anytime you have trouble, and you do the right thing. That's why it's so difficult to try and tell somebody to do something in one day. Put it in your pipe and smoke it, it's gospel. If you really have trouble, everything is wrong. And whether you're smart enough to do the right thing or somebody helps you do the right thing, you can bet your last dollar that that right thing is going to start correcting, and you say, oh, how lucky I am, how lucky I am. It's going to get better and better and better. And all of a sudden, because you've changed the condition, that right thing is exactly the wrong thing, because you've changed your whole operation again, your whole sludge balance. So that's why you have to test day by day and conform to the day by day tests. What these guys did, they kept on going this good way so bad until the effluent got terrible again. It settled too fast from bulky. Then they switched over again to parallel flow, and they had this again. Then they went there. Finally, later on, they'd always anticipate. They'd go plug when they needed and step when they needed it. What happened there? I think some of you guys know why we had before step no data. No BOD data. They would take BODs about once every 2 weeks, and you guess which day they took the BOD, which day they analyzed the BOD. But they did have more TSS data, 43, in my own mind, and they weren't trying to kid us, but I'm sure this BOD was up to 100 or more before we came in. Now, when they first switched to step, for 2 months, they got this BOD down to 9 and solids down to 18. And after they got a little more experience, when they shuffled back and forth, for a 6-month average, they had BODs of 10 and suspended solids of 9. It worked. What do we got here? Sioux Falls. I missed giving you something very important, right? We're not going to worry about that. But let's say SSC, concentration. Something, this SC 5, 10, and 15. Let's run it out 2 hours. Let's say we had started with a mixed liquor concentration, ATC, about 4,000. Let's call it 4. And let's say that it concentrated something like this. And about here, it leveled off. I better get up to 20. Doesn't make any difference. Let's make it 6. No, I don't want that number. Let's make it 17. I don't know what kind of endpoints that come out. We just put down some numbers. Let's say ATC, measured, observed, equals 4.0. Now you say to yourself, what'll I do? RSC was someplace up here. You know it's in the clarifier too long. You say, should I make this, let's say this was 16. Should I force this thing down to 16? You say, heck no, if I go at 16, I might be in the clarifier an hour and a half, or 2 or 6 or 8. Let's be reasonable. Let's get it down here someplace, in this top part of the curve. We'll call this SSCT, time. In other words, this is what you as an operator select. This is the judgment for the whole thing. This depends upon an operator, not upon a calculator, a computer, or anything else. So you say, from this curve, I'd like to bring my sludge out at 15. Oh, look, by the way, that means I'll be leaving it in the clarifier about 1 hour. And now this is someplace in the book. I better tell you where it is. It's in part 3A, just so you don't read it, but just so you know it's there. Clarifier sludge flow demand, page 40. I hope. Yeah, it's all here on page 40. Just so you know, it's all in here. I may explain it in different words, but here it is. You don't have to remember it. I mean, you don't have to copy anything down. You might want to copy this example. So, for control, let's also say, I don't know what we're going to come up with. Let's say flow 1.0 mgd. We'll see what we want to do with this. So we say, all right, now, desired. You notice I'm saying approach. I'm not saying equal. You don't care if you hit it on the nose or not. You want to get it close to 15. Now it depends upon if you want, you got to take your own choice. Do you want to find out how many million gallons of return to return, or do you want to know what percentage? If you got fairly steady state, you want to calculate for return flow in million gallons right away. But if you have a flow going like this, you're better off calculating the percent requirement, and then you can follow that constant percent and change your flow. So let's say desired. Okay, preliminary. Actual. CSP. Now, come on. Somebody must know what CSP is by now, right? What is it? CSP. Oh, come on. Huh? Clarifier sludge percentage. Yeah. Here. The percentage that you're returning over here. All right, now you can calculate CSP from ATC and RSC. That's in there also. Just the mixing formula. Equals. This is gospel truth. I mean, it's just mechanics. Equals ATC over RSC minus ATC equals, we said ATC was 4 over the observed 17 minus 4, of course, which equals, get out the calculator, fellas, 4 divided by 13. What's 4 divided by 13? Anybody got one? What? 0.31 equals 0.31. In other words, you are returning about 30%. That's what you're doing. All right, now, what should you be doing? Clarifier sludge percent demand. Clarifier sludge percent demand. This is what you should be doing. Equals RSC. Don't let it throw you. It's just nothing more than simple mass balance with a section cut around the clarifier. Very simple. It's got to work this way. It works 100% of the time. Minus ATC over SSCT. That's what you wanted. See, now you plug in what you want. You said, see, minus ATC. Okay, so, huh? Did somebody say something? No? Okay. Equals RSC of 17 minus 4, and you want 15 minus 4 equals 13 over 11. Get your calculator out. Oh, and I forgot something already, didn't I, huh? Anybody catch me on? Nobody caught me on this. I'll do it. Bah! Equals CSPD. CSPD equals CSP. In other words, what you have. What you have times that fraction. So I'll do it all over again. So it equals what you had 0.31 times this fraction of 17 minus 4 over 15 minus 4 equals 0.3 times 13 over 11 equals 0.3 times what? 13 over 11.
1.18.
All right, 1.18. Okay, that's telling you to return 18% more. That's all it's telling you. So really, it's... so, now, if you're dealing with CSPs, I mean, so you should set... If you've got an automatic controller, they're so nice. I don't mean a sophisticated thing. Just something that... if you were the operator now, here's what you would do. You'd say CSP equals 0.31 times 1.8, and that equals what? No, 1.18. 0.36. I didn't use a very good example. It should have been a little farther apart. So you as an operator, if you have an automatic controller, would go over to this controller and move your set point from 31 to 36 and let the darn thing go. But if you don't have a controller, then you say, if my flow is 1 million, and I have to find clarifier sludge flow equals 1 million times 0.36 equals 3.6 mgd. Any questions about that? That'll carry you right through all the time. Return sludge flow control. There she is. Every time. It's one of these things that works 100% of the time. Let's see if I missed something else that I wanted to dwell on. Okay. I think I'm going to sum this up because if we got time, we can go into some case histories. But if you take... Oh, I didn't give you a dynamic sludge age yet. We're going to have some time? But I did. I think I'll take the time to run through DSA. This BLT versus CSP, I pretty much covered that. You can read this and carry on through. Those of you who have this other paper, DSA, let's see what page you should turn to. All right, turn to page 1. Regardless of how you computed sludge age in the past, compute it this way. DSA equals, and it's all explained, new sludge fraction times new sludge age plus old sludge fraction times old sludge age. And here's the terms that go into it. And then you come up with the number. It's all logical, by the way. Don't let it throw you. I have the rationale behind. And then go to the curve past page 3. And that's the first one of a Tallahassee curve. I want to show you what happened. We have about 6 weeks of data here. This is real-world stuff again. This isn't hypothetical or theoretical. We'll go like so. Let's talk about dynamic sludge age, DSA, and MCRT. Everybody knows what MCRT is, and that mean cell residence time. It's the old standard. Okay, and we'll take that in days up as high as, this is a semi-log scale, 50 days, 100 days, 0 days, and we had a period of about 6 weeks for about 9 days at the start of the control, 9 days at the days. 6 weeks. For the first 9 days, we started increasing the wasting. And the MCRT went up from about 8 to 40. Okay? But this DSA, the way we're calculating, went from about 8 to 9. All right, 9 days. Well, let's see what happens to us. 40 divided by 9 equals about 3½ days. How in the devil can a sludge age 3½ days? How in the devil can a sludge age 9 days and 3½ days? In 9 days. How? No, I got this all wrong. 9 minus 8, 32. How can a sludge age 32 days and 9 days? You know, it says, me as a piece of sludge, I'm with you, Buster, all the time. I am getting 3½ days older every day. Just doesn't work, does it? All right, that's one thing. Now, many people recognize this, but I'll tell you why it's so bad. So, we say MCRT, that's MCRT, 3½ days per day. Wrong. Then later on, as we go on over to here, it keeps on increasing up until 60 days. Now, this is following the classic calculation procedures. No monkey business, real data, classic in the Federation Federation journals, just the way the experts say you should do it. On the other hand, how many of you guys know if you start with a good sludge, within a few weeks later you're going to have a sludge that's 60 days old? Doesn't work. It's wrong. Then we changed everything, and it came down in the last 9 days, back down to about 20 days. 20 days. Okay, now it got 5½ days younger every day. That's not so good either. This could happen, but this can't happen. But now let's draw the MCRT. I'll tell you what the dynamic sludge age is. It means that we really evaluate the old sludge and the new sludge built up every day, and we know that we're wasting some of each. We're not just taking one crazy old number, dividing by another crazy old number, and getting a real crazy answer. So here's the way the dynamic sludge age turned out, like this, like that. So this was about 8 days. This, I think, was about 9 days. This was about 15 days. This is about 16 days. All right, first of all, whether you know anything about this, well, if you know the business, but have no strong feeling about either method of calculation, this just appears more logical than the above one. But what did we say before? What did we say before? If you believe this, you're going to know the truth. Sludge quality is defined by SSC. Right? Sludge quality is defined by SSC. As age. No, do it again. As wasting. As you reduce wasting. Okay, we're going to reduce wasting. Now, we don't care how you calculate. What's going to happen to age when you reduce wasting? Increases. Okay, age. Not either of these two, but real age. The age that God said you got in the plant. A-G-E. Increases. What happens as you increase age? We talked about controlling sludge quality by waste control. Increase age, usually what do you do to your sludge quality? You increase sludge, well, at least you start increasing the SSC 60. SSC 60 goes up. SSC 60 goes up. If we always put an about in here, that's gospel truth. So, that means age goes up as somewhat of an element of proof. There should be some kind of a relationship between age and SSC, right? Let's draw the SSC 60 for this. It started off at about 15, went up to here, went up as high as 20, came down here, and like that. All right, without getting into great refinements, if this is sludge quality, which looks more like this one or that one? Sure. It pretty much conforms that. Okay. Then let's go to the next figure. Just 2 cases, and I'm going to be done. That tells you one thing. And I'll tell you what this amounts to. See what happens here? Oh, later on, if you go to equilibrium, say you really operate for about 60 days at equilibrium, you will find then that dynamic sludge age will just about equal MCRT. As a matter of fact, there's about 1/2 day difference. All right, what does that mean? After you get to equilibrium, when you've done all your work and you're all done, you say, now I lay me down to sleep, I've succeeded, then MCRT is wrong. You know, the only time it's right is when you don't need it, and when you need it, it's wrong. Okay, this is the same plant, but the other side of it, a separate stream. This illustrates something else. I'll just do it real fast. MCRT, like this.